starting with the upcoming elections in Togo?
Yes, now, last night was actually the deadline for names to be submitted for that. The opposition had long threatened to boycott the July 21st polls, but our sources say that it was just minutes before the midnight cut-off line. The main opposition parties backtracked and decided to field candidates anyway. Pinning down a date for the vote's been tough, and alongside postponements, there have also been a series of protests against President Faure Gnassingbé by critics demanding electoral reform. Nicholas Remar tells us more.
Scenes of violence in the Togolese capital Lomé earlier this year. Protesters clashed with police and called on President Faure Gnassingbé to resign.
Why are the police doing this here in Togo? While we struggle to live day by day, why?
There have been several similar demonstrations in recent months, with protesters demanding reforms before the parliamentary election on July the 21st. The reforms were not implemented, and the opposition initially said it would boycott the polls before changing its mind. Above all, it wants a new National Election Commission and a limit to the number of presidential mandates. Meanwhile, Faure Gnassingbé's party has accused the opposition of wreaking havoc by starting fires that ravaged two major Togolese markets. In 2010, Faure Gnassingbé was re-elected after a controversial vote against Jean-Pierre Fabre. Faure Gnassingbé first came to power 5 years earlier after the death of the president, his father, but there again the opposition alleged widespread fraud. According to the UN, nearly 500 people were killed in violent clashes. Faure's father, the dictator Gnassingbé Eyadema, ruled Togo from 1967 to 2005.
Well, earlier I spoke to Professor Aimé Gogoué, a member of Let's Save Togo, one of the main opposition groups that have now decided to participate in the vote. He told us why they changed their minds.
There are people, the population are asking us to go to the election, not to leave the election only to the regime. We are still asking for some changes in the electoral framework to change the ballot, the way the ballot will be counted, and to change the number of the member of parliament. We just give a list of our candidates, and we will keep on making pressure on the regime to change things. The international community is asking us to do it. We have done it, and now we will ask them to do their part of the job, make pressure on the government to change the framework, the electorate framework. Yeah.
Professor, now, okay. on Tuesday, earlier this week, 10 coalition members who'd been jailed in connection to accusations of having been behind a massive fire that ripped through markets earlier this year, they were released from prison. Is that a sign that the relationship between the opposition and Gnassingbé's government is actually improving?
No, it's not yet improved, because we still have some people in jail who are candidates. If they are not freed, there will be serious problem for the election.
Okay,
it will be serious for us, yeah.
Okay, and more on the election in Togo, of course, as it happens. Now, Georgia, in Libya, there is a new U.S. ambassador.
Yeah, now that is Deborah Jones. She arrived on Thursday, taking up her post 9 months after her predecessor and 3 other countrymen were killed in an Islamist attack on America's mission in Benghazi. Jones has served much of her career in Arab countries, and on Thursday it was welcomed by Libya's parliament. While no one's yet been charged with the killing of the late ambassador Chris Stevens. As Jones was sworn in last week, she acknowledged that it would take time for democracy to take a firm hold in Libya, but did praise the progress so far. In South Africa, a youth leader who's been expelled from the ruling party appeared in court Thursday on corruption charges. Julius Malema was kicked out of the ANC and is accused of fraud, money laundering and racketeering. He says he's innocent and told the magistrates' court that he's the victim of a political conspiracy by President Jacob Zuma's government. The trial date is still to be set.
Okay, there's been another postponement of a high-profile trial at the ICC, the International Criminal Court.
Yeah, it's put off the trial of Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta. Now, the case had been set to go ahead next month, but has now been pushed back to November. He faces a list of charges related to post-electoral violence in Kenya in 2007, in which over 1,000 people died.
Postponed, but not dropped. The International Criminal Court said it would open a trial against Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta in November rather than July the 9th, in order to give his defense team time to prepare. Prosecutors said they had not changed their minds, however, and would still press charges of crimes against humanity against the recently elected leader. Kenyatta is accused of helping to orchestrate the ethnic violence that killed more than 1,100 people after Kenya's 2007 presidential election. He faces 5 counts, including rape, murder, and forcible transfer. During that disputed election, Kenyatta backed the victor, his predecessor Mwai Kibaki, against Raila Odinga. Odinga became prime minister and 6 years later lost the presidency to Kenyatta himself. Kenyatta will become the first sitting head of state to stand trial at The Hague. Last month, the African Union accused the ICC of being racist and imperialist and called for Kenyatta to be tried at home.
The process ICC is conducting in Africa has a flaw. The process has degenerated into some kind of race hunting.
Kenyatta's deputy vice president, William Ruto, is facing similar charges at The Hague. Both he and Kenyatta have denied the charges against them.
Now, jihadists from al-Shabaab have threatened to follow up yesterday's fatal assault on a UN base in Mogadishu with more attacks. The city was on lockdown today with heavily armed army trucks lining main roads and the UN compound. The spokesman of the Islamist group has vowed that non-believers who remain in the country will never be safe. Elsewhere, witnesses in the coastal town of Brava say that there's been heavy fighting between rival factions of the movement. Al-Shabaab's denied this, but if confirmed, it is the first signs of in-house violence since the group launched an insurgency back in 2006. Meanwhile, a Swedish court sentenced a man to life in jail for the part he played in the 1994 Rwandan genocide. Stanislas Banenande was found guilty of taking part in the slaughter of ethnic Tutsis during the 100 days of violence that left around 800,000 people dead. The civil engineer denied recruiting young Hutu fighters who went on to kill their victims at several locations, including a school and a church. Rwanda had initially asked for Banenande to be extradited, but Sweden refused because he now has Swedish citizenship.
And we're taking a look at the fallout from the Rwandan genocide on this International Refugee Day.
Yeah, the genocide forced thousands of people to flee over the border into Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, almost 20 years later, many are ready to go home. Every week, the transit centre in Goma receives around 100 people who say that they want help to return. Many crossed over when they were children and, having spent decades in the Congolese bush, have no memory of their homeland.
Goma's transit centre receives at least 100 people a week who want to go back home to Rwanda. They use the expression going home even if many of them have no memory of their country of birth. Most of them crossed the border after the 1994 genocide, when they were children. For the past 20 years, the Congolese bush has been their home.
I was born in Rwanda and my parents say it was beautiful before the genocide. I've heard it's peaceful now. I'd like to see it for myself.
They all tell the same story. These thousands of civilians who have been caught up in a conflict that has escalated in recent months. This mother of 2 lost her husband. He was killed in the mountains of Masisi.
My village came under regular attack by armed groups and all the residents have fled.
It's not easy for these refugees to return to Rwanda because most of them don't have any ID. That day, 68 of them crossed the border. Since 2002, more than 60,000 people have been repatriated. But if the Congolese want to speed up the process, the Rwandan authorities want to bring it to a halt. So these refugees, who are legally neither fully Rwandan nor Congolese, could well end up stateless.
They're waiting for the government and the UNHCR to sit down with the Rwandan government to talk about their case.
A decision on whether they can keep the refugee status is due at the end of the month. An estimated 100,000 people are still in limbo. Only when they manage to cross the border are they finally given a passport.
Okay, that's it from me.
Georgia, thank you very much indeed. Georgia Calvin-Smith with
Thanks,
African
Mark.
News. We're taking a short break. After that, it's more news, the sport, and our special focus. You're watching Live in Paris on France 24.